It was a day that should have been filled with excitement, anticipation, and joy. The kind of day where I had envisioned the culmination of years of love and commitment. I remember the morning vividly. The sun was shining through the kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, scrolling through emails related to the wedding. The wedding planner, a seemingly trustworthy guy named Mark, had been working closely with my wife, Sarah, to finalize the details for our upcoming nuptials. Little did I know that day would mark the beginning of a nightmare. It was just after lunch when I received the text message that changed everything. My phone buzzed incessantly, pulling me away from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and my heart dropped. It was a message from a mutual friend, someone I had always trusted. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I saw Sarah with Mark last night. They were close. I think you need to know." The world around me blurred. The walls of our home suddenly felt like they were closing in. I could hardly breathe. I spent the next hour in a haze, my mind racing with disbelief and anger. How could Sarah do this to me? The woman I loved, who promised to cherish me, had betrayed me with someone I considered a friend. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The image of her laughing with Mark, her eyes sparkling, made bile rise in my throat. Questions flooded my mind. Was this an isolated incident? How long had this been going on? Did I fail to see the signs? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My heart pounded as I drove home, the familiar streets now feeling foreign. I replayed the moments of our relationship in my head, searching for clues that I might have missed. The laughter we shared, the dreams we built together, all felt tainted now. I arrived home, my hands trembling as I opened the door. "Sarah," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I found her in the living room, going over wedding plans, completely unaware of the storm brewing within me. The sight of her, so blissfully immersed in preparations, sent a wave of rage through me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and tense. She looked up startled. "What's wrong?" "Don't play innocent with me," I snapped. "I know about you and Mark." Her face drained of color. For a moment silence hung heavily in the air. I could see her mind racing, trying to form a response. "What do you mean?" she stammered, but I could see the truth in her eyes. "Don't deny it. I know you've been seeing him. How long has this been going on?" The anger boiled over and I could feel my heart racing. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the depth of my pain. She stood up, backing away slightly. "It's not what you think," she pleaded, but her voice lacked conviction. "We were just what, planning our wedding. You're sleeping with the man who is supposed to help us celebrate our love. How could you do this to me?" My voice cracked and the tears I had been holding back threatened to spill. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant for it to happen." "It just happened, I echoed, incredulous. "You think that makes it okay? You think you can just brush it off as a mistake?" I could see the regret in her eyes, but it was too late. The trust we had built over the years was shattered. I felt betrayed, not just by her, but by the very fabric of our life together. Every moment, every shared dream now felt like a lie. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of making her understand the gravity of her actions. I wanted to take control of this situation, to ensure she faced the consequences of her betrayal. As I stood there, the weight of my heartbreak settling in, I realized that this was not just about infidelity. It was about justice, about making her pay for the pain she had caused. I was done being the victim. I would make sure she felt the repercussions of her choices. The silence in the room was deafening after my outburst. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, a relentless reminder of the emotional chaos brewing inside me. Sarah stood there, her expression a mix of fear and regret, but I was beyond caring about her feelings at that moment. I needed answers. I needed to confront the reality of what had happened. Who initiated it? I demanded, unable to hide the venom in my voice. "Was it you, or was it him? Did he manipulate you into this?" She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "It was mutual, I swear. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't know. I got caught up in the excitement of planning the wedding, and he was there. He listened to me when you were busy with work. I didn't think." "Didn't think what?" I interrupted, my anger flaring. "Didn't think you ruin our marriage before it even began. Did you think it wouldn't matter to me, that I wouldn't find out?" "I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. Love. I scoffed, the word feeling foreign in that moment. What kind of love allows you to betray your partner with someone who is supposed to be helping us build our future? That's not love, Sarah. That's selfishness. The tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer, reaching for my arm, but I recoiled. Don't touch me, I yelled, the pain coursing through me making it hard to think straight. You've lost that privilege. I watched as she flinched, her hands falling to her sides. The sight of her despair sparked a conflicting emotion within me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But the stronger part of me, the part that felt utterly betrayed, reveled in her anguish. She had taken my trust and shattered it, and now I wanted her to feel every ounce of that pain. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done? I asked, my voice low but firm. You've ruined everything we've built together, our wedding, our future, all of it is tainted. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll do anything to make it right, just please don't leave me. Make it right, I echoed, incredulous. How do you plan to do that? By pretending this never happened? By sweeping it under the rug and acting like we can still have a happy marriage? I can't trust you, Sarah. Not anymore. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy, but it quickly faded as I remembered the betrayal. I thought about the life we had planned, the dreams we had shared, all gone in an instant because of her selfish choices. The anger within me morphed into something more calculated. I wanted her to pay. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice steadying as I made a decision. I'm going to take legal action. Her eyes widened in shock. What? You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, I replied, the determination in my voice surprising even myself. I'm going to sue you and Mark. You both deserve to face the consequences of your actions. Please don't do this. It was a mistake. Just give me a chance to fix it, she begged, desperation creeping into her tone. A chance? I laughed bitterly. You've already had your chance and you threw it away. You think I'm going to let you off easy? You think I'm just going to walk away and pretend everything is fine? No, Sarah. I will make sure you understand the impact of what you've done. She fell silent, staring at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. I could see the realization dawning on her, the understanding that I was no longer the forgiving husband she had always known. The man standing before her was hurt, angry, and ready to fight back. I'll make sure you pay for this, emotionally and financially, I said, my voice cold. I want you to know that your actions have consequences, and I won't let you hide from them. As I turned away from her, I felt a mixture of relief and resolve. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control. The betrayal had ignited a fire within me, and I was determined to see it through. I would make her understand the depth of her betrayal, and I would not rest until I had justice. After the confrontation, I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and heartbreak. Each moment stretched out like an eternity, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. I replayed the scene over and over, the image of Sarah's tear-streaked face etched into my memory. I felt like a ghost in my own life, wandering through the motions while my heart lay shattered on the floor. The wedding I had dreamed of was now a distant fantasy, replaced by a bitter reality that I could hardly bear. But amid the chaos, clarity began to emerge. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could either wallow in despair, allowing her betrayal to consume me, or I could take action, real, decisive action. I had spent enough time being the good husband, the understanding partner. It was time to flip the script. I would not allow her to walk away unscathed. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, and the best way to ensure that was to take legal action against her and Mark. I began researching the legalities surrounding infidelity and emotional distress. I learned about how courts sometimes viewed infidelity as grounds for divorce, and I started to formulate a plan. I wanted to ensure that Sarah faced not just emotional consequences, but financial ones as well. If she thought she could betray me and walk away without repercussions, she was sorely mistaken. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and started jotting down my thoughts. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my power. I felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut, and now I was ready to pick up the pieces and craft a new narrative. I wrote down everything I felt, the hurt, the anger, the betrayal. I wanted to channel those emotions into something productive, something that would hold her accountable. As I put pen to paper, the weight of my decision started to lift. I felt a sense of control returning to my life, a feeling I hadn't experienced since discovering the affair. I was no longer just reacting to her betrayal. I was actively choosing my path forward. I envisioned the courtroom, the legal documents, and the moment I would stand before a judge, laying bare the truth of what had happened. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in family law. During our initial consultation, I laid everything on the table. I told him about Sarah's affair, my emotional distress, and my desire to pursue legal action against her and Mark. He listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and regarded me with a mixture of sympathy and professionalism. Infidelity can complicate matters in divorce proceedings, he said slowly. While it might not affect the legal division of assets directly, it can certainly impact alimony and other financial obligations. If you want to pursue this, we can build a case that highlights both the emotional and financial ramifications of her actions. His words struck a chord with me. I wanted Sarah to understand the depth of her betrayal, to realize that her choices had consequences that extended beyond our relationship. I nodded, determination solidifying within me. I want to proceed, I said firmly. I want to sue both of them. As we discussed the next steps, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking charge of my life. My lawyer explained the process: filing for divorce, documenting evidence of the affair, and potentially seeking damages for emotional distress. I listened intently, absorbing every detail as I mentally prepared myself for the battle ahead. The thought of dragging Sarah and Mark into a courtroom sent a thrill of adrenaline through me. I imagined the look on her face when she realized I was serious, that I was willing to fight back. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, and I wanted Mark to understand that he couldn't just waltz into my life and destroy it without repercussions. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. I had a plan, a direction, and it felt good to reclaim my agency. I was ready to take on this battle, not just for myself, but for the sake of my self-worth. I would prove that I deserved better, that I would not be a doormat for anyone, least of all my own wife. That night, I sat down with my laptop and began drafting the necessary legal documents. The words flowed easily as I described the events leading up to the affair, the emotional turmoil I had endured, and my intent to hold both Sarah and Mark accountable for their actions. Each word felt like a cathartic release, a step closer to justice. I was no longer just a man betrayed. I was a man on a mission. I knew this would be a long and difficult journey, but I was ready for the fight. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would emerge stronger, more resilient, and I would make sure Sarah understood the true cost of her choices. The path ahead might be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to see it through. I was ready to take my life back. The days turned into weeks as my decision to sue Sarah and Mark became a reality. I filed for divorce and initiated the lawsuit against both of them, citing emotional distress and the breach of trust that had occurred. The moment I handed over the papers to my lawyer, a sense of finality washed over me. There was no turning back now. I was committed to this path, ready to fight for my dignity and sanity. The legal process was daunting. I quickly learned that navigating the world of family law was like stepping into a labyrinth. There were forms to fill out, court dates to schedule, and evidence to gather. I spent hours poring over documentation, trying to compile every email, text message, and photo that could support my case. I wanted to ensure that when the day came, I would present an undeniable argument. My lawyer advised me to keep a detailed journal of my emotional state throughout this ordeal. He explained that documenting my feelings could help illustrate the impact of Sarah's betrayal on my mental well-being. At first, it felt strange to write down my pain, but as I poured my heart onto the pages, I found it therapeutic. I wrote about sleepless nights, the anxiety that gnawed at me during the day, and the profound sense of loss I felt for the future I had envisioned with Sarah. As the days went by, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was not just fighting against my wife. I was also taking on the man who had invaded our lives, the wedding planner who had betrayed my trust. Mark had been someone I had considered a friend, and now I was facing him as an adversary in a legal battle. The thought of seeing him in court sent a shiver down my spine, but I reminded myself why I was doing this. I needed to reclaim my strength. The first court date arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. I dressed in my best suit, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling inside me. As I walked into the courtroom, I was struck by the weight of the moment. The room was filled with an air of formality, the judge seated high above us, presiding over the proceedings with an air of authority. I took my seat, my heart racing as I glanced around the room. When Sarah entered, I felt a rush of emotions. She looked different, almost fragile, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But as soon as I remembered the betrayal, that flicker was extinguished. She took a seat across the aisle, and I could see the tension in her posture. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding mine. I was reminded of how far we had fallen from the couple we once were. As the judge called the case, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. My lawyer stood up to present the case, outlining the facts of the affair and the emotional toll it had taken on me. I listened intently as he spoke, reliving the pain as he detailed the timeline of events. Each word felt like a dagger, but I knew it was necessary. I wanted Sarah to understand the depth of her actions. When it was time for me to take the stand, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I recounted the events leading up to the discovery of the affair, my feelings of betrayal, and the psychological impact it had on me. I spoke about sleepless nights, anxiety, and the sense of loss that consumed me. I wanted the court to see me not just as a victim, but as a man who had been profoundly affected by another's choices. After my testimony, it was Mark's turn. I watched as he approached the stand, his demeanor confident and self-assured. I felt a surge of anger as he began to speak, downplaying the affair and attempting to paint it as a mere fling. My blood boiled at his nonchalance, and I struggled to contain my emotions. I wanted to shout at him, to confront him about the pain he had caused, but I knew I had to keep my composure. As the questioning continued, my lawyer pressed Mark about his role in the affair and the trust he had violated. Mark's responses were evasive, and I could see the cracks in his facade. He was not the charming wedding planner I had once trusted. He was a man trying to save himself from the consequences of his actions. I could see Sarah watching him, her expression a mix of shame and regret, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of satisfaction. The legal battle dragged on, with multiple court appearances and ongoing negotiations. Each session felt like an emotional roller coaster, and I often left the courthouse feeling drained. But I was resolute. I had come too far to back down now. I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice the toll this was taking on my mental state. The stress of the legal proceedings seeped into every aspect of my life. Friends and family expressed concern for my well-being, but I brushed off their worries. I was focused on the goal ahead. I had to remind myself that I was fighting for justice, for accountability, and for my own peace of mind. But as the legal battle wore on, I found myself grappling with the emotional aftermath of it all. The anger was still there, but it was slowly being replaced by a sense of exhaustion. I was tired of fighting, tired of reliving the betrayal. I realized that while I wanted justice, I also needed to find a way to heal. The courtroom became a battleground, but I was beginning to understand that healing would not come from a verdict alone. It would come from within, from reclaiming my life and moving forward. I would not allow this betrayal to define me, and I would not allow Sarah or Mark to take any more from me than they already had. The legal battle reached a critical juncture as we moved closer to the final hearings. Each day felt like an eternity, and I found myself increasingly consumed by the intricacies of the case. But amid the chaos, one thing remained clear in my mind. I needed to make sure that Sarah faced the financial consequences of her betrayal. It was not just about emotional retribution. I wanted her to understand that her actions had real-world implications. As we prepared for the next court date, my lawyer and I discussed the financial aspects of the case. We reviewed the marital assets and debts, evaluating how the affair had affected our financial standing. I learned that in many jurisdictions, infidelity could influence the division of assets, especially when emotional distress was involved. The prospect of this added a layer of motivation to my resolve. I had never been one to focus on money, but now I found myself thinking strategically. I wanted to ensure that Sarah felt the weight of her choices. I envisioned her facing the reality of her decisions, having to grapple with the financial ramifications of her actions. It was a form of justice I felt was necessary, a way to ensure she understood the depth of her betrayal. The day of the hearing arrived, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. I dressed meticulously, choosing a crisp white shirt and a tailored suit. I wanted to present myself as strong and composed, a stark contrast to the turmoil that lay beneath the surface. As I entered the courtroom, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was a pivotal moment, one that would dictate the future of my life post-divorce. During the hearing, my lawyer laid out the case for emotional distress, detailing the impact Sarah's affair had on my mental health and well-being. I could see Sarah sitting across the room, her expression a mixture of shame and defiance. I wanted her to feel every word, to understand that this was not just a minor indiscretion. It was a betrayal that had shattered my trust and altered the course of my life. When it was my turn to speak again, I took a deep breath and recounted the financial implications of the affair. This is not just about what happened between us, I stated, my voice steady but charged with emotion. It's about the trust that was broken, the plans that were ruined, and the financial stability that was jeopardized. I want to ensure that Sarah understands the consequences of her actions. As I spoke, I could see the judge's interest peaked. I detailed how I had invested in our future together, from wedding planning expenses to shared savings for a home. I explained how the affair had not only affected me emotionally, but had also disrupted our financial plans. I believe it is only fair that Sarah faces the financial consequences of her choices, I concluded, feeling a sense of empowerment wash over me. The judge nodded, taking notes as my lawyer continued to present evidence. We had compiled a thorough case, showcasing not just the emotional turmoil, but also the financial strain that had resulted from Sarah's infidelity. I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing that I was laying bare the truth, forcing Sarah to confront the reality of what she had done. As the hearing progressed, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. I could sense the tension building, and I knew that the judge was weighing the evidence carefully. Sarah's lawyer attempted to downplay the affair, arguing that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, but I could see the judge was skeptical. The gravity of the situation was palpable, and I felt a sense of hope creeping in. Finally, after what felt like hours, the judge called for a recess. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I caught sight of Sarah. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, and I could see a flicker of vulnerability in her expression. It was as if she was realizing the depth of her mistakes, but I quickly pushed that thought aside. I was not here to sympathize with her, I was here to seek justice. During the recess, I stepped outside to gather my thoughts. The sun was shining, and for the first time in weeks I felt a glimmer of optimism. I had taken control of my narrative, and I was determined to see it through. I knew this was just one step in a long process, but I felt empowered by the fight I was putting up. I would not let Sarah's betrayal define my future. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge delivered their ruling. Considering the evidence presented, I find that the emotional distress caused by the infidelity has significant implications for the financial responsibilities moving forward, the judge stated firmly. I felt my heart race as I listened intently. I will grant the request for damages based on the emotional toll this affair has taken. The words washed over me like a wave of relief. I had fought hard for my dignity, and the judge's ruling validated my experience. I could see Sarah's face fall, and for a moment I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the consequence of her actions, and while it brought me a sense of justice, it also marked the end of a chapter in my life that had once been filled with love and promise. As we exited the courtroom, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had reclaimed my narrative, and while the road ahead would still be challenging, I knew I was on the path to healing. I was ready to move forward, ready to embrace a future that was no longer dictated by betrayal but shaped by my own choices. I had taken a stand, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been betrayed. I wanted to show that there were consequences for actions, and that accountability was crucial in rebuilding trust. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt lighter, ready to face whatever came next. In the weeks following the court ruling, I found myself in a state of flux. The emotional weight of the legal battle had begun to lift, but the aftermath of it all lingered like a shadow. I had fought hard for justice, and while I felt a sense of accomplishment, I also felt a profound sense of loss. The life I had envisioned with Sarah was gone, replaced by uncertainty and the need to rebuild. I took the time to reflect on everything that had transpired. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving scars that would take time to heal. I realized that the fight for accountability had been important, not just for the financial repercussions, but for my own sense of self-worth. I had emerged from the ordeal stronger, more resilient, and with a clearer understanding of what I deserved in a relationship. As I navigated my new reality, I began to focus on self-care. I started exercising regularly, channeling my frustration and pain into physical activity. Each drop of sweat felt like a release, a way to cleanse myself of the negativity that had built up over the months. I explored new hobbies, reigniting passions I had set aside while planning for a future with Sarah. I rediscovered my love for painting, using it as an outlet for my emotions. With each brushstroke, I transformed my pain into something beautiful, a testament to my journey of healing. I also sought therapy to help process the emotional fallout from the betrayal. Speaking to a professional provided me with valuable tools to cope with my feelings and to understand the complexities of trust and love. I learned that healing was not linear. It was a journey filled with ups and downs. I allowed myself to grieve the loss of the relationship while also recognizing that it was an opportunity for growth. As I continued to heal, I started to think about my future. I envisioned a life filled with possibilities, free from the shadows of betrayal. I wanted to build a future grounded in trust, respect, and mutual understanding. The experience had taught me invaluable lessons about what I wanted in a partner and the importance of setting boundaries. Eventually, I began dating again. The first few dates were nerve-wracking, but I approached each new connection with an open heart and mind. I was cautious, of course, but I also felt liberated. I had learned to communicate my needs and expectations clearly, ensuring that I would not find myself in a situation where my trust could be so easily shattered again. With time, I met someone who sparked my interest. Her name was Lily, and she had a warmth that drew me in. We bonded over shared interests and values, and I found myself slowly opening up to the idea of love again. It was refreshing to engage in a relationship built on honesty and transparency, a stark contrast to my past. I took things slowly, allowing myself to enjoy the process without the weight of past betrayals hanging over me. Throughout this journey, I often thought about Sarah and Mark. I had no desire for revenge anymore. The legal battle had served its purpose. I had held them accountable, but I also understood that clinging to anger would only hinder my own healing. I wished them both well in their lives, knowing that I had to let go of the past to fully embrace my future. I found strength in forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. I forgave myself for the trust I had placed in Sarah, for believing in a future that had been built on shaky ground. I learned to forgive myself for the pain I had endured, recognizing that it was part of my journey. I emerged from the ashes of betrayal with a renewed sense of self, ready to embrace life with open arms. As I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons learned from this experience. I understood the importance of trust and communication in a relationship, and I was determined to foster those qualities in my future partnerships. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ready to write a new chapter in my life. In the end, I realized that while the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. I had taken control of my narrative, turned my pain into power, and learned to love myself again. Life was waiting for me, filled with new possibilities and connections, and I was ready to embrace it all. I had faced the darkness and come out on the other side, ready to step into the light. With that, I closed the chapter on my past, knowing that I had the strength to move forward, no matter what lay ahead. And with that resolution, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was ready for whatever the future held.